Welcome to the latest edition of Shannons Club TV, the program celebrating the achievements of cars in Australia on the road and in competition. Join us as we reflect on the significance of our feature car and take a road trip with a proud enthusiast.
We'll also get the latest market advice from the Shannons auctions team. So let's take a look at a car from the 1960s with astonishing capabilities that have almost been forgotten. The Peugeot 404.
When the Peugeot 404 arrived in Australia in November 1962, it looked like a skinnier, more upright version of the Austin Cambridge and Morris Oxford that had been on Aussie roads for the past 3 years. It even looked less substantial than the earlier Peugeot 403. Its price of £1,450 or $2,900, about 15% more than the more powerful and exciting S-Series Valiant, was met with the reaction of, "You've got to be joking." Who would have guessed that this strange and unassuming little 1.6 litre car was hiding a mechanical specification and design excellence that would keep it in demand in Australia until 1970. It lasted until 1975 in France with few discernible changes. Australians would certainly have kept buying it beyond 1975, perhaps even until 1991, as in other markets, if convoluted local tariff laws hadn't forced it off the Australian market prematurely. Mark, it would be hard to name another four-door sedan that looked less like a serious motorsport contender, yet it's up there with one of the greatest of all time.
Just an amazing car, wasn't it? It was never going to be successful on the racetrack because it didn't really have the right power to weight ratio. But as a long distance rally car in the 1960s, this thing was astonishingly good. You know, it had tank tough construction, it had that beautifully supple suspension to soak up the biggest bumps, it had fantastic brakes, and that torque tube rear end just gave the rear wheels enormous traction. I mean, this was a world-class rally competitor.
And it was immensely strong.
Amazing.
So why was the Peugeot 404 so revered? The short answer is that it was the most accomplished and sophisticated development of the basic front engine live axle rear drive layout that was the convention of the era. It's similar to how the VW Golf is seen today versus other front drive models, except the gap between the 404 and other rear drive models was much bigger. Big enough, in fact, for the 404 to be rated as one of the best cars in the world at the time. All visible brightwork, including grille, bumpers, hubcaps and trim strips, was stainless steel. Its steel-belted Michelin radial tuned suspension was 16 years ahead of Holden and was also often rated as the best in the world. The 404's safe and roomy body design offered all-round vision that was world's best practice. Its 9.6 metre turning circle and superbly weighted rack and pinion steering set a new benchmark. The 404 brakes, disc door drums, were usually described as spectacular. Its torque tube rear suspension provided exceptional traction and grip. Its cross-flow Hemi head engine and slick 4-speed manual were not just efficient. Nothing broke and it seemed to last forever. The reclining front seats and the flow-through fresh air ventilation also set a new standard for this type of vehicle. Then the unbelievable happened. After Australian content was increased, the price dropped to just $25.50 in 1965, a price it held until the end despite ongoing improvements to performance, braking and safety. Mark, Peugeot really didn't have to do much to sell the 404 in Australia with an overseas reputation like this one.
Yeah, and that was largely because of it repeatedly taming one of the harshest continents in the world. There was no tougher annual test for car manufacturers in the 1960s than the iconic East African Safari Rally. The Peugeot 404's dominance of the gruelling 5,000 kilometre event was a testament to its peerless integrity and endurance that attracted a loyal following in many countries, including Australia. In an amazing era commencing in 1962, the 404 won its first safari the following year and another 3 consecutive victories from 1966. In the intervening years, it twice finished second outright, claimed 2 class wins and a coveted team's prize. The 404's revered status is justified when you realise how close those safari rally cars were to the showroom product, and the hellishly tough conditions Africa always had in store, from roaming wildlife to rock-throwing locals, baking hot sun and blinding dust, to torrential rains, flash floods and thick mud. Joe, all those safari wins, they must have really impressed rural car buyers here.
Well, they not only impressed rural car buyers, anybody who loved travelling in across the country. And I was one of those.
That's right, you owned one, yeah.
Well, I bought one when I was 18. It was my first modern car. I bought one that was near new, one of the disc brake models, one of the very last of them. Fabulous car. It was a bit of a culture then when the Vietnam era was on that you steered away from American multinationals, and buying a French car made in Australia was the way to go. And it did everything that a Holden did and much more. And I was just astonished by how good that car was. But then the French started bombing the Pacific.
Yes.
Not only did parts, I remember finding it really hard just to find a distributor cap, but it sort of got a real taint to it as a result of what they were doing, and I think it just lost its lustre, but it was a fantastic car.
Gee, it was a volatile time in politics.
It certainly was.
The 404's achievements in Australian motorsport paled by comparison to its stunning record in Africa. The more powerful fuel-injected models that dominated the Safari were not sold in Australia, and competition resources here were limited through local assemblers. Even so, the 404 proved to be a popular machine for club-level competition and earned its stripes when it stepped up to major long-distance events in racing and rallying. Bob Holden and Bill March finished third in class at the 1963 Bathurst 500, the 404's one and only appearance in the Great Race. A reliable run for a three-car team in the 1964 Ampol trial and third in class at the Sandown 6 Hour proved the 404 had the strength, if not the raw speed, to justify its reputation as one of the toughest and best engineered road cars in the world. Don't forget, you can join the conversation on the Shannons Club forums with a host of interesting topics.
My name is Neville Sanders and I'm lucky enough to have this 1967 Peugeot 404 sedan. Yes, I've had the car for about 12 months. It was owned by the one family for about 45 years and then it was sold to an enthusiast in Sydney. The car's in its original condition on the interior. The only thing that's been done to it, to the best of my knowledge, is it had a full respray about 10 years ago. Only thing I've done since purchasing it was to source one of the original roof racks and had that brought up to good clean condition and fitted to the car. Yeah, the engine in it's a 4-cylinder at 1618cc. It's got a cross-flow Hemi head. It's all alloy and it also has steel liners, so as they wear over time you can actually replace the pistons and liners and you've basically got a brand new motor. So they were built with longevity in mind and they are really robust. They just keep going. My favourite feature of this vehicle is that the vehicle itself is putting it on the highway, just cruising. It just steers beautifully straight, lopes along. My first Peugeot was a 403. My original passion was probably driven by the fact that the Peugeot was very advanced for its day. It was a joy to drive. It wasn't just transport. You could actually enjoy your driving experience. Whilst the cars have evolved over the years and so have their competitors, they've just always had that appeal for me and I really enjoyed them and had a very reliable run on all my cars over all the years. So love the Peugeots and their reliability and style and all the things about them.
Shannon's National Auctions Manager, Chris Borrobin, joins us with the latest on the Peugeot 404. Hi, Chris.
Welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you.
Peugeot 404, I imagine it's a bit like the Citroën DS in terms of, you probably don't see that many across the auction blocks, but there's this huge enthusiastic core behind it.
Yeah, there is definitely a good following amongst the club. As you mentioned, it's similar to the Citroën where there is a strong club movement, but yeah, we don't really see it out often through the auction house here. Yeah.
Well, Chris, the car has a tremendous following in historic rallying, and a lot of the mediocre ones, instead of being restored, have been trucked off to the rally workshops.
Bash cars.
And there's a few very good survivor examples. They don't quite have the mainstream appeal of the Citroën. They're just this funny-looking French car, but the people who know about them are passionate about them. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, fair comment, definitely. There is definitely a passion out there for certain Peugeot models, and I think the 404 falls into that bracket. So I think the people who in the know and in the club scene are pretty passionate about it, and as you mentioned, quite heavily involved in the rally scene. Yeah, we don't see too many of them on the historic section of tracks, but yeah, good rally car, obviously.
And they seem to organise amazing events. They're always travelling around Australia or doing something. So if you want an active life with a car,
right.
It seems the Peugeot 404 is a good ticket to get involved in that club activity.
Yeah, I mean, the 404 proved itself over the years, reliability, a strong car, and it's why it's favoured by a lot of Peugeot enthusiasts, I'd say, today.
And there are different models of the 404, of course. There's the sedan, and then there's the wagon.
That's right. Yeah.
And that very rare drop-side ute, which I haven't seen, in living memory.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the most desirable model these days if you get your hands on one?
Oh, I mean, because we really don't see many of them come through. Personal choice, I think, but yeah, I think some people are going towards some of the rarer variations of the 404s. But then again, for practicality, if you've got a family or friends, probably the sedan's a good option.
Yeah, good.
Well, thanks, Chris. The 404 is that below the radar, but still ticking along.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And remember, you can get all the latest auction news on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like a lasting memory of any competition cars featured on the show, you'll find them all at autopix.com.au.
Joe, early in the show you mentioned the convoluted local import laws that forced the 404 off the Australian market. What was the crux of that?
You basically had to choose a model and you weren't allowed to make anything that was too close. And they measured this by the capacity of the engine.
Right.
So there's a Renault 12 and Renault 16. The Renault 12's capacity was too close to the Renault 16, so they had to put a smaller engine in the Renault 12 to allow the correct gap.
You had to get a big differentiation between engine sizes.
Yeah. And that was very difficult for European cars, where all European cars, regardless of size, had small engines.
Yeah.
Peugeot 504 came along, fabulous car. Renault wanted to put it into local production. It was just under 1800. Peugeot was 1618. Government said too close. You can't run the two. And because the 404 didn't have that long to go compared to the 504, which had right through to, I think, the late 70s, early 80s, they went with the 504. And so this wonderful 404, which could have coexisted and been made locally, had to go. And that was the craziness of the whole system in those days.
It's such a shame though. I mean, if you had a car that was custom made for Australia, that 404 must have ticked so many boxes.
Well, it sold for $25.50 and the 504 really was a $4,000 car. And what Peugeot had to do was put it on the market for $3,400 to pick up that gap. Whereas they could have quite easily coexisted, and the silly part about it, produced twice as much work.
Yeah, what a shame.
Just a shame. So we hope you've enjoyed this look back at the Peugeot 404, and we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV.